north to south, coast to coast, around the world. This is the Wells Report. Greetings. My name is John David Wells. What do? We report the news honestly and fairly. We analyze the news for fact and bias. We point out both. I make commentary, but that's not news. That's just my opinion, just as valuable as yours. And so we debate. News, analysis, commentary, and debate. This is the Wells Report. Greetings. It's really cold, at least as far as we're concerned, in North Texas. Winter has actually arrived. There's a combination of sleet and snow. I call it slow. And it's decorating my cul-de-sac as we come to you this broadcast from Fort Wells Keller here in North Texas. Our cul-de-sac, by the way, is a very, very good skating rink right now. I mean, it's covered with, I'd say at least a half an inch of ice. It's serious ice. And people are having trouble with it. As a matter of fact, people who are trying to travel are having immense difficulty with it. More than 1,600 flights have been canceled so far. Winter weather impacting more than 40 million people in the central and southern United States. This from CNN. The cancellations are concentrated where the storm is hitting. Nearly half the cancellations are in Texas. And the vast majority are from two states, or two airlines, rather. That's American Airlines and Southwest. Both are based here in the Dallas-Fort Worth area. Even though those cancellations largely happen in Texas, it could very well be at least ripple effects all across the country for air travel as crews and aircraft get potentially displaced. They run out of time because air crews can only work so many hours, et cetera, et cetera. They get stranded. Passengers get stranded. Airplanes get stranded. And airlines try to put those pieces back together again. And let me tell you something. People are really trying to get this all figured out. A lot of people remember a couple of years ago, almost 2 years exactly, when the Texas deep freeze hit. The organization, I have to be careful with my language here. The organization responsible for making sure our power grid had enough power to actually distribute to everybody blew the call. They could not believe how cold it was. They had no idea how long it was going to last. And what they had done is they had underbid the necessary amount of electricity to keep people's lights on. So in the coldest winter in memory, we ended up losing about 500 Texans because ERCOT, the Electric Reliability Council of Texas, were too busy interested in personal bonuses than actually running a utility. It was criminal in my view. And so every time it gets cold, people go, okay. Those people that don't have generators wish they did or have made other arrangements. This reporter has a generator to basically power this whole house. And the reason that's the case is because of that freeze a couple of years ago. Despite cold weather and icy conditions, the Texas power grid this time around, however, is fine. No problems expected, according to Governor Greg Abbott. He said, quote, the power grid itself is functioning very effectively as we speak right now. There's not anticipated to be any challenge to the power grid in the state of Texas. There, by God, better not be. As of 9 a.m. this morning, there were 7,000 local power outages across the state being addressed by local utilities. Governor Abbott said the Public Utilities Commission is coordinating with utility providers and monitoring power outages. They have plenty of reserves and plenty of power. Good. The governor encouraged Texans to stay off the roads and avoid driving if they can. He said 1,600 roads across the state are impacted by ice. Texas DOT used more than 1.3 million gallons of brine and other material to treat the roadways, and 2,100 pieces of DOT equipment are being used. He said the Texas National Guard is prepared across the state to assist stranded motorists, clear roadways, provide welfare checks, and Texas Park and Wildlife has at least 30 responders preparing for search and rescue operations. They talk about the massive power outage in 2021. It was outrageous. It was a self-inflicted wound. By the way, I also want to tell you something. Before I tell you, I want to make sure that you understand that even though I'm a Texas State Guardsman, I am not speaking for the Texas State Guard, nor as a member of the Texas Military Department am I speaking for the Texas Military Department. This is just me. I am very, very proud to serve as a first sergeant for A Company, 4th Battalion, 1st Brigade, Texas State Guard, and we're ready to. We're ready to go with our National Guard buddies, our brothers and our sisters to help out if necessary. We are standing by. Just so you know, you got a lot of great people here. So that's what's going on. Now, I did want to show you this. One of the cool things about racing cars is you actually learn how to handle what I'm about to show you. Because it's one thing when you're going 20, 30 miles an hour and you're on ice. But when you're going 120 or 130 miles an hour and this kind of stuff happens, things get real exciting. And so in racing school, in my case, the Bob Bondurant School of High Performance Driving, I learned how to deal with all this. But I wanted to show you this because at some level, it's comical because nobody gets hurt or hit here. But on the other hand, there's some things that you can learn, and I want to show them to you here. Okay, so this is what's been going on in our little world. Okay, you'll note that guy lost control on the bridge. You see the difference in the pavement? Yeah. Once the guys are off the bridge, it's not a problem. Watch this Mustang. That's not a Mustang, actually. That's a Nissan. But once people get off the bridges are what's slick. Okay, so if you're, you've got those earthworks leading up to a bridge, et cetera, but once you get off the bridge, you can pretty much get control of your car. All right? So you're saying, John David, what can we learn on this? First of all, the bridge will ice long before the rest of the road. That's thing number one. Thing number two, you'll note that nobody could see the ice on the bridge. That's called black ice. It's actually clear ice. The road is black in some cases. In Texas, most of the time, it's concrete. So you can't see the ice. So what do you do when you're coming up to a bridge? How do you get across the bridge without sliding sideways like you just saw? All you do is you coast. You simply take your foot off the accelerator and just coast. What happens is when you're in a low traction environment, what happens is that everything you do has to be slower. Okay, everything. Your top speed is slower because you have limited amount of adhesion to the road. So your top speed is slower. You hit the brakes slower. You're a lot more gentle. You're a lot more smooth with the car. And a lot of people are having trouble just trying to drive forward because their wheels begin to spin. I'm going to teach you a technique called trail braking. Trail braking is where you take your left foot, the one on the accelerator, you take your left foot and you put it on the brake. And you accelerate. And when you hear your wheels or feel your wheels begin to spin, just put a little pressure on the brake. What that'll do is depower your drive wheels. This works on front-wheel drive cars too. And what it'll do is depower them, and your tire will actually stop spinning so fast and stick, and you can just drive along. I used to own an 86 IROC Z. I drove that sucker almost all the way through the 90s. I loved it. It was a great car. I really enjoyed it. Handled well. It was fast. It was really good. But I drove that through the wintertime in Pennsylvania when we didn't have just a little half-inch covering of ice. We had packed powder on the freeways. And once I realized that all my driving technique, my racing technique worked beautifully on the snow, I was pretty much able to drive anywhere I wanted to as fast as I wanted to go. In fact, in a blizzard with my wife, Susan, sitting in the passenger seat, we drove from Wilkes-Barre, Pennsylvania to the Mount Pocono Lodge. It was about 38 miles on a 2-lane twisty road. We got there in about 45 minutes because there was no problem driving. There was just no problem driving. It was fantastic. I really enjoyed it. As a matter of fact, it was one of the most fun drives I've ever had, and I've driven some really nice race cars, but that was fun. Susan, on the other hand, she was very stoic. She had this kind of a smile on her face, and so on and so forth. And we got out of the car, and I said, "How'd you like that?" And she started beating me with anything she could find. She didn't say a word. Okay, let's see. What do we got here? Okay, so that's all the weather stuff. So I taught you trail braking. So if you're driving on this accumulated slush, not slush, but sleet, just take your left foot, drag it on the brake. And whenever you feel the car beginning to spin, your drive wheels beginning to spin, just put a little pressure on the brake. It'll work perfectly. Trail braking. It's fun too. And always just coast across a bridge when you're in a freezing condition. Just coast across it. Don't turn. Don't turn. Don't hit your brakes. Don't do any of those things. Just let the car coast through. Okay? So there you go. All right, so let's see. Thank you for the link. Hi, JD, Lois Floyd. Now, apparently, oh, by the way, Kelly Lyons asks if everybody's okay in Texas. As a matter of fact, everybody's okay in Texas, as far as I know. Again, I'm not speaking for the Texas State Guard or the Texas Military Department, but my unit got taps on their shoulders today from my platoon sergeants, my NCOs, and I just passed that report on up to the boss. So, yeah, we're doing fine. At least my unit's doing fine. I hope all of you are. And if you're not doing fine, somebody will come and help you. And who knows, maybe it'll be us. Let's see who else is going on. Everybody on K Texas, or yes, Chris Grimes is here. Chris, good to see you again, my friend. How's everything going? Let's see. All good. Howdy. Okay, so I need to find out. Oh, goodness gracious, your pipes are frozen again? Yow. You know, they just don't build southern houses the way they build northern houses. You know, they don't. North of the Mason-Dixon line, they have this pipe freezing thing figured out. But down here, not so much. Not so much. I left a power washer out on my back porch. We named him Mikey because he looks like one of the characters from the Gru movies. Anyway, Mikey is frozen up pretty good. We tried to detach him from the hose, no go. And we poured hot water on the connection, no go. And we did everything we could, no go. But apparently, somewhere at the end of the week, we should have warm enough temperatures to keep us from freezing together with each other, and I'll be able to rescue Mikey. Let's see. By the way, it was an ID 10T error, says LM Valiant. It was an ID 10T error. Apparently, he didn't drip the pipes. He didn't leave the pipes dripping a little bit. Okay, there you go. By the way, I need to find out if anybody's watching us on YouTube, because apparently, without my knowledge, there are 4 people watching on YouTube. I'm not trying to bait the bulldog here, but I'm supposed to be suspended for another 2 days. Maybe that appeal thing that I threw out there worked. If, by the way, that is the case and they let me off the hook on YouTube, thank you very much to the management of YouTube. I sincerely appreciate the fact that you saw things my way. I was just reporting a news story. This is a news broadcast. It's the Wells Report. We'll be back with more coming up in just a moment. This is the Wells Report. My name is John David Wells. Our telephone number is 817-379-2172. It's right there on the little lower third right there. Okay, you can see it right there. Studio line, that's our studio line. You can also join us on chat. Now, as you know, last week the Wells Report was suspended by YouTube. And I found out something very, very interesting. Apparently, YouTube is actually carrying the show as we speak. As a matter of fact, I don't know how many people are watching on YouTube. Okay, there are 8 people watching on YouTube right this minute as we do the show live. You cannot interact with our chat room. Okay, apparently they're allowing the Wells Report to be on, but they suspended us last week for 1 week, and near as I can tell, that's supposed to be done tomorrow or Thursday. Depends on when they started the actual suspension, and they're kind of hazy on that. But all I can say is that if you have something that you want to chat with me about, go over to Facebook. It's facebook.com/The Wells Report, John David Wells, all one word. And by the way, leave the H out of the word John. So it's facebook.com/The Wells Report, John David Wells, JONDAVIDWELLS. That way you can get in on the chat, but it's a lot easier just to call me on the telephone. So if you're watching on YouTube, give me a buzz at 817-379-2172. Operator is standing by. That's me. So we all know that it's terrible to sit in a traffic jam. It's terrible for your health. Well, now there's some real, honest to goodness, no kidding data to back that up. Apparently, breathing in diesel fumes while sitting in traffic can be disastrous for your brain. This is according. Oh, hi. Hi, this is the Wells Report. How's everything going?
It's going well, Mr. John David Wells.
I know who this is.
You do?
Yes, I do.
No, you don't.
This is Kelly Lyons from ODOT.
Yes, it is.
How's everything going?
Are you guys safe in Texas?
Yeah, we're fine, except we need one of the ODOT crews to come by and spread some salt across our cul-de-sac. It's a skating rink.
Okay, so we're not using salt anymore. Did you not know that there's a new beet-based solution that they put on?
Beet?
That it's beet. Yeah, like the beet, the vegetable, the beet.
You mean they finally figured out that beets are not food, and now they use them to melt snow?
They use them to melt snow, and it doesn't destroy the salt is bad for the road. It causes huge potholes, and it deteriorates the road. So someone came up with this new solution, and it's beet-based.
It's beet-based.
It is as purple as the beets themselves. It's really funny to look at, but it doesn't go on the road purple. It doesn't cause any damage to anybody's car.
Yeah.
It just has beets in it, which melts the ice faster.
Yeah.
Lasts longer, and it won't refreeze.
That's amazing. That's absolutely credible. As a matter of fact, you can't beat that.
Well, I just wanted to say hello to all of my friends in Texas, and you guys, please be safe. I saw the video that you were running earlier, John David, so you guys be safe.
Yeah, man, there's a lot of it. How's everything else going with you? You okay?
Yes. I told someone earlier I want to get in my car and just drive until I can't drive anymore. But I have to work, and work,
yes.
Everybody has the same thing at work.
Yes. Well, if you ever decide to do that, make sure you head south. All right?
Absolutely, I will head south. I just won't tell anybody. I have my reputation to keep.
Of course. Yeah, thanks. Yeah, because,
by the way,
I was, yes. Boomer sooner. Yeah.
Take care, everybody.
Isn't that great? I invite somebody to come over to the house, and she says, well, I won't be able to tell anybody because I want to protect my reputation. Yeah. This is the Wells Report. My name is John David Wells. It is a very, very wintry day in North Texas. We got all kinds of precipitation on the roads and ice and so on and so forth. It's kind of weird, actually. We'll be back with more coming up in just a couple of minutes. Thank you. This is the Wells Report. My name is John David Wells. Snowy and sleety and slick and icy and all kinds of winterness all around us. It's good to have you here. Trying to keep you warm with real news, doing our best to do exactly that. We have news of the border here in Texas. It's not just frozen, it's also getting safer. I know that seems like it's a bit of an odd combination. But yesterday, Governor Greg Abbott, who is taking border security seriously in the state of Texas, but not just for the state of Texas, for the state of our nation, announced the creation of a Texas border czar. I'm not a big fan of that term. You know, Texas border supervisor, Texas security secretary for the border, something along that line. But the czar thing kind of, whatever. Anyway, we have a Texas border czar. He's appointed recently retired Border Patrol agent Mike Banks to handle that. He just retired from the Border Patrol 10 days ago, and he's going right back to work. He's going to tap his expertise to deploy strategies that reduce illegal immigration and keep the community safe. Like I said, he retired from the Border Patrol 10 days ago. He's going to work along with the Texas Military Department, the Department of Public Safety, and Texas Facilities Commission to accelerate the building of the border wall in Texas. Now, this is something that we've been trying to get done for a long time, not just Texas. But in Arizona, what they ended up doing was putting these big shipping containers covered with razor wire on top of them to try to keep people from crossing the border illegally. Strangely enough, the Biden administration sued Arizona to remove those containers, and they did. So far, there has been no action against the state of Texas from Joe Biden. I'm not exactly sure that there would be much of a response that the president would be interested in. Sooner or later, somebody's going to tell the president of the United States, if he keeps asking us to do these things that are patently anti-American, somebody's going to tell him to buzz off. I'm betting it's going to be Texas. And so the best way to stay out of a fight with Texas is to not try to pick a fight with Texas. That's one of the things that that people have learned over the years. Just not a good idea. You know, Texas, we have it together here. We like having it together here. And we do the right things here. We mind our own business. We let people do whatever they want to do. We understand that your rights and entitlement end at the end of your fist when it touches my nose. If that happens, Katie, bar the door. So I don't know why the government of the United States would file suit against Arizona and then find themselves not being in a lawsuit with the federal government in Texas, except, of course, we don't want to mess with Texas. It's one of our mottos. Don't mess with Texas. But anyway, Banks said his top priority in his new job is to make sure the state of Texas is the least desirable place for illegal immigrators to cross. I don't think it's going to be that difficult. We just need to be more aggressive. I'm not going to comment on any of that. All I can tell you is that in my humble opinion, Secretary Banks is exactly right. Exactly right. And by the way, this is just an opinion of mine. I'm pretty sure he's not talking about being more aggressive with the people trying to cross. I'm pretty sure he's trying to make sure that we interdict them. In other words, we make sure that they don't cross before they even start thinking about it. Head west, young immigrant. This is not the state for you to cross the Rio Grande. You probably want to go to Arizona or California. Just saying. Since President Joe Biden came into office, Governor Abbott has heavily criticized the president's immigration policies. In March of 2021, he launched Operation Lone Star, sending hundreds of National Guard soldiers and State Guard soldiers with state troopers to border counties to apprehend migrants crossing the border. Hundreds of migrants have been charged with misdemeanor trespassing and are being held in prison. The state has spent more than $4 billion on the effort since Operation Lone Star began. It is a privilege to be able to say that I have served in Operation Lone Star and very well may do so again. During the Monday news conference in San Benito, Governor Abbott said combating illegal immigration in Texas is a full-time job. It requires a leader whose only focus is responding to the president's immigration policies. Absolutely true. Abbott did not offer specifics on Banks' duties or how much he's going to be paid. I can guarantee he's not going to be paid enough. That's an important mission. You got to stop this. The depravity alone would be enough to make you throw up anywhere you happen to be. I would hope that you'd find a waste can someplace, but I don't think you would. It's pretty awful. Banks worked for the Border Patrol for more than 20 years, serving under 4 presidents, including as the agent in charge of the Border Patrol station in Weslaco and McAllen. During the press conference, Governor Abbott also highlighted the ongoing border wall construction by the state and said his office calculated the state is spending $25 million per mile for wall construction. Considering how much stuff comes across that wall, that is pennies. This is the best money Texas has ever spent, ever. So far, the state has erected a 1.7-mile stretch of wall on state-owned land in Starr County, part of a $162 million contract awarded to New York-based Basilico Civil Incorporated. In November of 2021, they built 8 miles of wall. Basilico Civil began another segment of the wall in December in Los Indios in Cameron County. Since Abbott announced the state would build a wall in June of 2021, the Texas Facilities Commission, an agency in charge of the project, has awarded 6 contracts totaling $841 million to construct and manage 37 miles of border barrier in Cameron, Starr, Valverde, Webb, and Zapata counties. And I've been to a bunch of those places. Got to tell you, this is what you got to do. This is what you have to do. And there's absolutely no reason why we're in this situation. The Constitution of the United States. The Constitution of the United States is clear. And that we have people that don't follow the Constitution is crazy. Yeah, they just don't. Let's get to Article 5 of the Constitution of the United States. Full faith and credit shall be given each state in the public acts, records, and judicial proceedings of every other state, and the Congress may, by general laws, prescribe the manner in which such acts, records, and proceedings shall be proved and effective thereof. Section 2. The citizens of each state shall be entitled to all privileges and immunities of citizens in the several states. A person charged in any state with treason, felony, or some other crime, who shall flee from justice and be found in another state, shall, on demand of the executive authority of the state from which he fled, be delivered up to be removed to the state having jurisdiction of the crime. No person held to service or labor in one state under the laws thereof, escaping into another, shall, in consequence of any law or regulation therein, be discharged from such service or labor, but shall be delivered up on claim of the party whom such service or labor may be due. Section 3. New states may be admitted by Congress to this union, but no new state shall be formed or erected within the jurisdiction of any other state, nor any state be formed by the junction of 2 or more states or parts of states without the consent of the legislatures of the states concerned, as well as the Congress. The Congress shall have power to dispose of and make all needful rules and regulations respecting the territory or other property belonging to the United States. Nothing in this Constitution shall be so construed as to prejudice any claims of the United States of or of any other particular state. Here's Section 4. The United States shall guarantee to every state in this union a republican form of government and shall protect each of them against invasion and on application of the legislature or executive when the legislature cannot be convened against domestic violence. In other words, the government of the United States owes us a border. All the money that Texas has spent on this border should be paid back by the government forthwith. And I would be demanding it if it wasn't for one small little issue. Why, what is that, John David? So glad you asked. That small little issue is this government's $32 trillion in debt. How are they going to pay us anything? The government of the United States, the people inside that government, owe every state a border. And they're not doing it. And they're not doing it on purpose. And that's getting very, very close to something that should be, shall we say, an arrestable offense. Now, I don't care whether you like the laws or the Constitution of the United States. But you don't get to pick and choose which laws you're going to enforce. And you sure as hell don't get to violate the Constitution of the United States because you're trying to redemography the voters so that you can always be in power. The problem with always being in power is you're responsible for everything that happens when that power is exercised. Everything. Including all the mind-numbing failures of this government. I was talking about this yesterday. Two-thirds of Americans think the number one problem in the United States of America is the United States government. President Joe Biden, don't ask me how, has a 40% approval rating. What is Congress's approval rating? What is it? You have any idea? I do. 20%. 20% of the people of the United States think this government is doing something worthwhile, at least the Congress. There is absolutely no excuse here. There is no excuse for any of this. These people take an oath. They take an oath to actually faithfully execute what I just read to you. Do they do it? The answer is no. And we have the fentanyl to prove it. We have the human trafficking to prove it. Human trafficking is not human smuggling. Human trafficking is the sex trade. A lot of these people that leave, say, for example, some Central American country and head through Mexico. God forbid you bring your attractive daughter with you. You'll very likely never see her again. And the only thing I can tell you on that is that they are smuggled across the border on a regular basis because that border is open. Nothing should be open on the border of the United States with Mexico. Nothing, except the international ports of entry. Those are the only things that should be easily taken care of, easily crossed. It's the only thing. This is horrifying. And it always comes back. One of the things about the United States, you don't get to hide from your own miscreancy. Sooner or later, accountability comes calling. These people are in power, and these people are acting the way they act in power because we put them there. We put them there. If people say, what are we going to do with our country? How are we going to fix this? I'll tell you how you're going to fix it. And we've got another chance in less than 2 years. Everybody who is running for office, everybody that's running for office, regardless of party, elect someone else. Just elect someone else. And you're saying, now, wait a minute, I really like my congressman. I adore Beth Van Duyne. Texas 25th congressman. She is fantastic. But if she has to sit out for 2 years because the people of the United States had to make a point with this federal government, then so be it. What would we have if what I just said actually happened? We want to get back control of this government. We can do it in less than 2 years by simply voting everyone that's currently in office out of office. Everyone. That is the very best form of the second United States Revolution that could possibly be. Imagine what the outcome would be. Think about that for just a couple of seconds. You've got a government that won't do its job. You've got a government that thinks its politics are more important than you. You've got a government that uses you like a piggy bank for all their buddies in other countries. Ukraine. We got hypocrisy from one end of the country to the other. It's all political, and it's all absolutely embarrassing. It's mind-numbingly stupid. Think about that for just a couple of seconds. I'm going to be back, and I'll tell you what I think when I think about the fact that in 2024, if we diselected everybody running for office and got new people, what message would that send? Back with more in just a moment. This is the Wells Report. My name is John David Wells. By the way, while we're talking about immigration, a group of illegal immigrants remain in protest outside the Watson Hotel in New York City. That's in Manhattan. They're sleeping in the streets. They've been there for nearly 2 days. They're pushing back against relocation from their taxpayer-funded hotel in Manhattan to a migrant crisis center in Brooklyn. Specifically, they're supposed to go to the Brooklyn Cruise Terminal facility. But they just decided they weren't going to go. They're all single men. And, you know, what ended up happening is that Governor Abbott finally said, you know what? These are sanctuary cities, right? Well, let's go ahead and send them the people that they've been inviting to our country. Let's send their party guests to their party. Oh, and suddenly things started to happen when it came to border security. Why, President Biden even went down to the border and saw nothing because all of it had been cleaned up before he got there. So these guys are going crazy out there. They're saying, no, we're not going to move from our hotel. We're not going to go to the Brooklyn Cruise Terminal facility. No, we're going to stay right here in the street. By the way, they were given free rooms at the $300 per night hotel. I suppose I wouldn't want to go to a cruise terminal center either, but you know what? There's an old saying in the United States, beggars can't be choosers. And so, let's think about this for just a couple of seconds. The Constitution of the United States is plain. These people owe us a border. And what is going on is that they are ignoring it for the sake of their politics. And it's both parties. It's not just one party. It's both parties. Everybody who says, well, wait a minute, the Republican Party wants a strong border. Oh, yeah? How come there isn't one then? Everybody says, well, now, wait a minute. What do you expect them to do? I'll tell you what I expect them to do. Until there's a bill signed by the President of the United States, Republicans shouldn't do anything. They shouldn't vote. They shouldn't do anything. They should all vote present. They should just be quiet. All the business, since the Republicans own the House of Representatives, all the business should stop, including this ridiculous debt ceiling thing. The Treasury Secretary, Janet Yellen, is saying that she has to go through extraordinary measures to keep the government operating. Yeah. You know what that's called? That's called tightening your belt. You've done it. I've done it. The federal government can do it too. If they need an emergency funding of a particular thing, they can go to the Congress and petition for it. But I wouldn't cooperate with anything until two things are taken care of. One, the border is secure. That means there's a wall-to-wall wall from Texas all the way through California. Nothing happens. It's up to you. Vote on the border security measure that is currently sitting in the House of Representatives. As soon as the president signs it, we'll start taking care of business. The rest of the things will just continue with continuing resolutions and emergency acts as necessary. It's called intransigence. And what I would suggest is, if we truly want to solve all of this, vote for somebody else in every election. Every single one. Certainly the national election. In national elections, senator, representatives, vote for somebody else. Stick with your party if you want to. I don't care. Just vote for somebody else. Vote for someone else. That would be all of the House of Representatives. It would be 1/3 of the senators. In this upcoming election, it would be the President of the United States, the Vice President of the United States. All new faces. Start over. And the best part, 2/3 of the senators would be left. They could sit there in that lofty chamber and go, well, so Mitch, you think they're serious? I mean, this isn't going to happen again in 2026, is it? I mean, I've got some suits I've got to buy, and yeah, that will get their attention. For the first time in the history of the United States, I'd love to report this. Today on the Wells Report, for the first time in the history of the United States of America, everyone in the House of Representatives was replaced by the American people. It was a long time coming. But finally, the American people realized that their Congress, the houses of Congress, were useless. More coming up after 11. I'm telling you, no, you cannot get every single one of them. You don't want to get every single one of them. You want the survivors to tell the newcomers just exactly how it happened. Don't you think? Vote for someone else. Good advice. I'll remember that when Ted Cruz is up for election next year. Okay. I'm fine with it. I love Ted Cruz. I do. I think he's one hell of a senator. I truly do. But I got to be perfectly honest with you. I want a government that doesn't use law enforcement, intelligence, and homeland security to beat the citizens over the head with. I want a government who will give us a real border. I want that more than I want to see Ted Cruz get reelected. This is the Wells Report. We'll be back with more coming up in just a moment. Hour number 1 in the can. Hour number 2 coming up in a second. You stay right where you are. Thanks very much for joining us today. North to south, coast to coast, around the world. This is the Wells Report. Greetings, my name is John David Wells. We report the news, honestly and fairly. We don't care whose political ox gets gored. We're just going to give you the news. You make of it what you will. We do analyze the news for fact and bias. We point that out. We also make commentary. That's not news. That's just my opinion. And we debate. That's what we do. And we debate strenuously sometimes, but we keep it chilly because this is a show that we don't want to screw up. Absolutely not. This is the Wells Report. Thanks very much for joining us. Let's see. Did the feed stop? JD is frozen on my screen. Am I still frozen? I don't think I'm frozen. I mean, I have been going outside from time to time and freezing, but I don't think I'm frozen. Let's see. Chris Grimes, who is a Democrat, said, step outside the echo chamber of Texas Republican circles. He's an embarrassment to the state and a nationwide laughingstock. He's talking about Ted Cruz. My conservative financier cousin from California always asks me, you live in Texas, why Ted Cruz? I just shake my head. Well, Chris, the reason that Ted Cruz won is because he speaks to Texans better than his opponents. Beto O'Rourke is a full-on totalitarian socialist. If you want that seat, you're going to have a party that actually runs a better candidate. I'll be perfectly honest with you. I think Ted Cruz is an amazing senator. I like him a lot. I absolutely do. I voted for him. I think I voted for him twice now. Anyway, let me do something real fast here. Ted Cruz. Ted Cruz is not an embarrassment. Ted Cruz is a guy who knows exactly what he's talking about. He's a graduate of Harvard Law, 1995. His father, Raphael, his mother, Eleanor, are the best people I've ever met. It's unbelievable, in fact. So let me see when he is due for re-election. Let's see, assumed office 2023. So I believe he just got elected, right? I believe he did. So he's got a ways to go before he would be one of the survivors I'm talking about. He'd be one of the survivors I'm talking about that would be there to say, hey, wait a minute, I was there for the great bloodletting of 2024 when we voted for somebody else. This is what we were talking about last hour. We're talking about this last hour. I said, we really, really want to make sure that that we do something else, that we absolutely do something else. Let me see. Okay, so Chris is telling me that he's up for re-election. When is Ted Cruz up for re-election? Okay, he'll seek a third term in 2024. Okay, when he took office for this congressional thing. Okay, so let me get back to what I was talking about. Ted Cruz is a great senator. He's not an embarrassment to anybody, except, of course, the Democrats he embarrasses on a regular basis because they're un-American. And you can take that as far as you want to, Chris. Your party is un-American. And all I can tell you is this. I want border security in this nation. I want the FBI to be a law enforcement agency, not a political action committee, not an enforcement arm of the Democrat Party. I want the DOJ to get back to the business of making this what it's always been up until now, which is a nation of law, not a nation of politics. I want this debt thing fixed. I want the IRS to administrate a flat tax system. Simple, basic, highest tax bracket, 15%. That's the highest tax bracket. I want a cap put on government spending as a percentage of gross domestic product. I want Social Security to be based on Treasury bonds so that when you pay your FICA tax, you get a Treasury bond back. In five-year in 5-year, shoot, I had the word right in my head. Anyway, in 5-year brackets that end when you're 65 or 70. And so at the end of your work days, when you finally retire and go out on Social Security, what you do is you cash your bonds. The government still gets the money. They just have to account for it. You know that magical Social Security lockbox they talked about? That was Harry Reid. The Republicans were stealing from the Social Security lockbox. There wasn't any such thing. I sat here on this microphone and I said, hey, there you go. Social Security lockbox. By all means, let's put one together right now. Let's base all of Social Security money on treasury bonds that these people have to pay off. And you know what? Didn't happen. The IRS is being used as a political action committee. Well, the best way to take care of that is to take away their power. Well, how do you do that? Well, here's how you do it. You do a flat tax situation. It's all individual income tax. You don't do a 30% sales tax. What are you talking about? I don't know which Republican came up with that boneheaded idea, but that was just plain dumb. That's just plain dumb. The way the country works is this. The federal government is nourished with the money from income tax. Okay? Yeah, there's going to be Social Security left when your time rolls around. There will be Social Security left, even if it bankrupts the nation doing it. Anyway, let's get back to business. What was I talking about? Golly. Man, I got to tell you, allergies and cold and all that kind of stuff, it's driving me nuts. Anyway, the situation that I'm talking about is this. I'm talking about the IRS being used as a political action committee. The FBI being used as a political action committee. The CIA being used as a political action committee. The DHS, the Office of National Intelligence, CIA. This is not some political club here. This is an honest to goodness, no kidding country. And if you guys are abusing your power because of your politics, we will remove you. So we get a real tax system. We don't have to worry about the IRS. Will it cost you, say, for example, I don't know, some of the deductions you use, like the deduction on your house in your mortgage interest income or your mortgage interest? Yeah. But you'll have the money to pay for it because you're paying somewhere around 27 to 28% taxes right now. 15%. What will also happen? Well, because suddenly your house doesn't necessarily become a middle class tax hedge. Housing prices will go down. I know. That's a drag. It's a drag. I understand. But if we don't do this country's $32 trillion in debt. We've got to do something about that. And we've got to do something where all these people that are abusing their governmental power find themselves hitting the bricks. We do that with the IRS alone. 60% of the people will be unnecessary. We'll simply say, gosh, have a great time. Take good care. Bye-bye now. Bye-bye. Because you can do your taxes at your kitchen table. Your W-2 says, well, you made $50,000. You owe 15% because you're in the $150,000 and below tax bracket. So you pay 15%. Well, let's see, you already paid that money, so you don't have to do anything. Or maybe you paid a little extra. You're going to get $250, $500 back. Or maybe you have to pay $250 or $500. Done. Well, wait a minute. That means that somebody that makes more money than me pays a lower tax bracket. That's right. If you want to pay a lower tax bracket, make more money. Just keep going. Just keep after it. Become more and more and more successful. Right now, your Social Security money, for example, goes into the government maw. You never see it. There's no accountability. It goes into the general fund. And so it gets spent along with the money that you're getting, that you're paying for your income taxes, and the income tax money from your kids, and the income tax money from their kids, and the FICA tax money from your kids, and the FICA tax money from their kids. They're spending it right now. And there you have the other thing. Put a cap on federal spending, 18 to 20%. It's about a $14, $15 trillion a year economy. You run the business of the United States on $3 trillion. If you can't do it, recalibrate. Or, better yet, don't screw up the economy. Don't say, for example, oh no, I'm not going to allow the Keystone Pipeline to be built. Well, that'll screw up the economy. Finally, when you screw up the economy, politicians will have less money to spend because they screwed up the economy. If they want to spend more money, they have to build up the economy. A rising tide lifts all boats, including the behemoth one called the federal government. I'm just sitting here, John David Wells, talk show, almost a 50-year broadcasting career, good God. I can figure this stuff out. How come they can't figure this stuff out? I'll tell you. Because they're not thinking, and they don't want to solve these problems because it really helps them out. All this ambiguity regarding government spending, people pretty much ignored it. Yeah, Reagan spent $3 trillion. Trump spent $5 trillion. Obama spent $6.6 trillion. So far, Biden has spent $5 trillion. Our national debt's now $32 trillion. It's the highest percentage of GDP since the Second World War. It's time to fix it. It's time to fix it right now. And you can't fix it by telling the people of the United States to pay more money. You fix it by fixing government. You make it plain. Coming up on 2024, if you're not going to fix these problems, we are going to replace you. And I don't care who you are. Takes us back to Ted Cruz. I love Ted Cruz. I will very likely at least consider endorsing him, if not campaigning for him. But he is going to hear this conversation. I would rather have a secure border than Ted Cruz. I'd rather have a comprehensible tax system instead of Ted Cruz. I want Social Security to be accountable to the people who pay for it, not the people who spend the money that we pay them. I want this country strong. I want that national debt gone. I want to get our crap together, and I want to stop depending on politicians for everything that we need. Depend on us for the things we need. Like a good, healthy growth environment for our kids instead of some crazy leftist notion of what entertainment should be for our children. This is the Wells Report. Back with more in a moment. This is the Wells Report. My name is John David Wells. Our telephone number is 817-379-2172. You can contact me anytime you want to. You can take part in the chat room. Kelly Lyons from Oklahoma says, I am a Democrat. I agree. We are a party of corruption. My party does not care about their party members. They're destroying the country. The Republicans are much better, but my 401k was a lot better. It didn't take a small loan to buy a tank of gas and a dozen eggs. Wake the heck up. Don't drink the Kool-Aid. I'm telling you, we have to get control of this federal government. The best way to do it is to fire the people that are running it. And like I said, I've got some friends in those offices. Ted Cruz is one of them. I think he's great. But I got to tell you something. I take my own advice. If it meant that I could get a border on my state, the Republican Party could do a lot more than what they're doing to fix the problems of this nation. But I got to be perfectly honest with you. Politics loves a problem, but hates a solution. They can play politics with the problem. Once they solve it, they go, well, now what are we going to do? Exactly. The problem with that is the people that thought up all this mess might think of something else. Now, that would be awful. So do I want those problems solved more than I want my friends in Congress? Yes. Yes. They'll understand, I'm sure. Let's talk a little bit about the Arizona elections. Everybody who sits there and says, my God, these people make these outrageous and stupid claims about elections. Why are they doing that? Well, I'll tell you why. Because questions aren't getting answered. Why aren't questions getting answered? Because nobody's willing to actually look for the answers. I'm not bringing anything up specifically. I don't have to. Do you believe your vote got counted last time? The people that answered no represent a larger number of people that answer no than has ever been the case in the United States of America. Listen to this. In Arizona, still a hotly contested election. It was outrageous. The top election official in Arizona has now asked the state attorney general to investigate Republican Kari Lake, who lost her 2022 gubernatorial bid for potentially violating state law by publishing voter signatures on her Twitter account. The request by Arizona Secretary of State Adrian Fontes, a Democrat elected to the office last November, comes after Lake posted a tweet January 23rd that made, according to CNN, this is biased coverage, an unfounded claim that 40,000 ballots did not match voter signatures that the state has on record. Lake posted a graphic that showed 16 voter signatures alleging they did not match those with the ones that Arizona has on file. Welcome to the Wells Report. Good to have you here. Thanks for joining us. What's up?
Yeah, we were trying to listen to the 28th, and we couldn't hear that show.
Oh, the 28th? Oh, okay.
It's only published. It's only 27th show and the 30th online.
Okay, so talk to me a little bit about what platform are you using?
I just Googled your show with the people at work, and then we listened to it.
Okay, are you on Facebook or are you on YouTube? Where are you?
No, we just go. I don't even know what it is. We just type your name on Google, and it comes up in a thing that says the show, and you hit that, and then it has different ones. If you missed them, you can go down and pick one of them.
Well, let me do this. Let me talk to you offline here.
Skip from the 27th.
Yeah, hang on a second. Hang on a second. I'm going to talk to you. I've got to go to a break here right this minute. So what I'll do is I'm going to talk to you in about 2 shakes. I'm just going to turn the microphone off, and you and I will talk, and we'll get you all hooked up. Does that sound okay?
Okay, thank you.
All right, you just stay right there. I'll be back with you in just a moment. You're listening to the Wells Report. My name is John David Wells. 817-379-2172. See, it does work. The phone number works. Please use it. Back with more coming up in just a couple of moments. How cool was that? Man, oh man. What I have to do here, I have to thank Errol. Errol just called me. He works at North Coast Environmental Filtration near Akron, Ohio. And they're watching the Wells Report today. He said there are about 20 of them down there watching the show. And they were looking for that show where I got to interview the great Greg Jarrett of Fox News. And had some very nice things to say about that show. And I really appreciate it, by the way. It's very, very nice for all of that. Thanks very much for watching and listening to the show. And we'll find that show for you. I'm going to figure out which one it was. He wanted the Greg Jarrett show. So we'll find that one and we'll get him a link and we'll set it up. Customer service is my middle name. Well, actually, David is my middle name, but let's just, play along. So what I was talking about before Errol called, and, telephone calls kind of preempt everything, right? So by all means, use the phone, 817-379-2172. What we were talking about is the top election official in Arizona is trying to get Kari Lake in trouble because she published the signatures on some 40 or 16 ballots. And the top election official says, my God, that breaks the law. We ought to throw Kari Lake in jail. Yeah, okay. Well, Adrian Fontes, who is a Democrat elected to the office of Secretary of State, is obviously new to the job, trying to flex their muscles and try to get Kari Lake invalidated as someone who could possibly embarrass them in the future. Fontes requested appropriate enforcement action against Kari Lake for publishing those 16 voter signatures. I don't understand why that's a problem. From what I understand, Arizona really doesn't care much about signatures when it comes to people voting. Why is it all of a sudden so important now? Fontes cited a state law that prohibits reproducing voter signatures other than the voter or a legally authorized person. Fontes' letter says the violation is a felony. Yeah. So here's what I want to say. Is this a righteous beef? In other words, is this a real law? Is this something that needs to be? Now, remember how I feel about law. You don't get to pick and choose. Remember what I say about the reporting on this broadcast. I don't care whose political ox gets gored. I don't care. But here's the situation. When law becomes a political tool, where do you draw the line? Or do you not draw the line? Do we go down the road of having political prisoners just because they happen to be able to figure out a law that they broke? Where do we draw the line? I actually have an answer. It's the jury system. The jury of your peers, which in Arizona is probably pretty good. Places like Washington, D.C., New York City, L.A., Chicago, Houston. Okay, in some cases Dallas, but Dallas is not as bad as the other cities. You might have a problem. You might have a bunch of wannabe politicians that want to make an example out of you. But in Arizona, probably not so much. Probably not so much. Okay? So all I can say is that is the actual answer to the question. Who decides? Who decides whether somebody is guilty of breaking the law? A jury. Should we throw this into the courts? Yes. Why should we throw it into the courts? Because they would have to look at the entire election process. See, this Secretary of State, that's how you know she's new, or he's new, sorry. That's how you know he's new. What are you going to do? You going to charge Kari Lake with a felony? Okay. And you're going to go into a courtroom and she's going to start asking you questions you don't have the answers to. And that entire criminal case is going to be about the 2022 election instead of whether or not Kari Lake published a picture of somebody's signature. And it's all going to come spilling out all over the feet and floor of everybody standing in Arizona. Yeah, go right ahead with that, Mr. Secretary of State. I can tell you the Democrat Party in Arizona is saying, shut up. Just shut up. Drop it. Just drop the whole thing. Just drop it. See, this is the kind of silly garbage that we find ourselves fighting with in these United States. Politics is not this important. Fix the potholes. Stop wasting money. Build a border fence. Make sure we have enough bullets and beans and ships and planes and soldiers. Make sure we have all of that. Make sure the post office works. Do the things the federal government does. But the federal government is really, really good at big, dumb things. Yep, the interstate highway system. Okay, let's get all of our financial ducks in a row. Let's get this national debt down to something reasonable, and let's add 2 more lanes on both sides of every interstate in the United States. Let's do it. Big, dumb, simple things. Let's stop giving the people in this government an opportunity to turn themselves into millionaires because of insider trading or deals with other countries or any number of other things. Let's find people that actually want to take care of their neighbors instead of taking care of their party. Let's start doing that. Let's have simple, basic laws. You have to show your ID to cast a ballot. You have to register for an election no less than 30 days before the election. We don't want fancy computer-based ballot voting machines. Here's what we want. We want a pencil, we want a ballot, we want a reader, and we want a box. Okay? The reader gives the people at the polling place the number of votes just to the polling place. Doesn't go anywhere else. They pick up the phone. They call somebody and say, okay, here are the vote totals for Tarrant County. And they, by God, better be right when the box is opened and those ballots are recast and recounted and audited. Or someone will go to JAIL. This is not hard. This is not hard at all. And by the way, they just did this in the European Union. If the French can get it done, come on. Ugh. Oh, my goodness gracious. Okay. Let's get back to business here. I'm sorry. I'm kind of on a Tuesday rant. All right. I'm just on a Tuesday rant. I'm so frustrated with all this garbage, like this. Here's another piece of garbage. Okay. I'm not talking about the person himself, although he might be a piece of garbage. What I'm talking about is the political stupidity of all of it. New York Republican Representative George Santos has decided he's going to back away from all of his committees in the House of Representatives. He has so far resisted calls to resign after reports exposed various lies he's told about his background. Embattled Representative George Santos, this, by the way, from Fox News, will step back from the 2 committee assignments he received in the House of Representatives. Multiple GOP sources confirmed to Fox News that Santos, in a Republican conference meeting this morning, will recuse himself from his assignments on the Small Business and Science Committees. House Speaker Kevin McCarthy faced numerous questions over whether Santos would be permitted to sit on House committees following revelations he fabricated his work in education history, among numerous other lies. McCarthy insisted that Santos would be allowed to sit on committees as an elected member of the House of Representatives, but he also said that Santos will be removed from Congress if a House Ethics Committee investigation determines he violated the law. We know that lying is not something that will get you out of the Congress. We know that's not true. Because people lie in Congress all the time. Adam Schiff, Eric Swalwell, Maxine Waters, George Santos. Come on. But if he broke the law, gone. Absolutely gone. But this also tells you something else. Okay? This also tells you something else. What does it tell you? And this is not going to come as a surprise to you. But how did George Santos become a candidate anyway? How is it that George Santos became a candidate when nobody obviously did even the most basic background check on the guy? Why is that? I'll tell you why. Because the New York Republican Party is incompetent. That's why. That's why. You got to do your homework. Well, now, wait a minute. Are you saying that the Republican Party ought to choose the candidates? No. The Republican Party ought to vet the candidates. And that, by the way, does happen. You do the things, you register and so on and so forth, and you say, you go down to the election board and you fill out your paperwork and you say, I'm going to run for the Congress of the United States. And you're going to run as a Republican. And you're going to run as a Republican. And before you know it, somebody from the Republican Party is going to knock on your door and say, hey, JD, let's talk. Would you fill out this form, please? We need to do some background work on you. Oh, that's fine. I've had background checks a couple, 3 times a year for at least 15 years now. It goes with the territory. And I'm perfectly fine. Go right ahead. They didn't do that with George Santos. And that's the level of competence that you can expect in the New York Republican Party. I'm not talking about coming up with new and innovative ways to cheat. I'm talking about coming up with honest, straightforward people who are who they say they are. That's not hard to do. That's not some special skill. Just being an honest person. Is George Santos an honest person? No. Is Elizabeth Warren an honest person? No. Adam Schiff? No. George Santos has a lot of room up there. And there's not a lot of room for a bunch of those people to start stomping all over George Santos. Seriously? Come on, you guys. Just exactly, just exactly what wool do you think you're pulling over whose eyes? Jeez. It's so funny to watch Adam Schiff squirming and trying to wrap himself in the flag and the Constitution. Yeah, we will treat Joe Biden just like we did Donald Trump. No, you won't. You lied again. You know, I've lived in Texas for a long time. I know that juniper and mountain cedar season is going to be over here pretty quick. But every year I come up with the same thing. I hope I don't die of this stuff. It's like, I don't know what, it's like inhaling some form of, it's like inhaling gasoline. My nose is burning. My throat is burning. I'm coughing and I get, anyway. It's just mountain cedar. Yeah, by the way, we were talking a little bit about the garbage in Arizona, which is what we're discussing here. You know, there was a story from the Arizona Republic that happened yesterday where they were talking about this voter audit. Apparently, what ended up happening is that the Arizona Republican Party, if there is such a thing, picked some people to do this Arizona audit. Okay. Thousands of new documents the Arizona Republic obtained by Cyber Ninjas, an obscure company state Republicans hired to conduct a partisan audit of the 2020 election, show the endeavor was fraught with conflict and confusion. The contractors confided they didn't know election law in Arizona when they were hired. They struggled to pay bills, raise money. They fought over what to report to the Senate. They got deeply sidetracked by a film about their effort and consistently were in touch with people who tried to concoct ways to keep former President Trump in office after his election loss. Now, keep in mind, this is the Arizona Republic. This is an obviously biased story. But the point of the matter is this. the actual thread that goes between these two stories, state Republican parties, at least in Arizona and New York, are getting awfully close to clueless. And what you got to wonder is, okay, since we're not talking about atomic science here. We're not talking about nuclear effect. We're not talking about chemistry. We're not even talking about biology here. We're just talking about running an election. They have a lottery in both Florida and New York. They don't have any problem keeping track of people in those lotteries. Why can't they do it in an election? The only answer is because they don't want to. Either party. What's the solution? Fire them all. This is the Wells Report. We'll be back with more in just a moment. Stay put. This is the Wells Report. My name is John David Wells. While we're on the subject of various legal eagles going after various Republican candidates, a New York grand jury will hear evidence about former President Donald Trump's potentially criminal role in making payments to porn star Stormy Daniels to keep her from sharing details of an alleged sexual encounter with the former president. This, according to multiple news reports from USA Today. Manhattan prosecutors began presenting evidence to a new grand jury yesterday, according to the New York Times and NPR. It could be the latest of President Trump's legal woes as he ramps up his 2024 bid for president. In a Truth Social post, Trump said the Stormy nonsense happened a long time ago, long past the very publicly known and accepted deadline of the statute of limitations. The former president added he placed full reliance on his counsel at the time, Michael Cohen, and said there was no reason to believe that he wouldn't do his job. Of course, he tried to parlay that into trying to embarrass President Trump, along with Avenatti, whoever the lawyer was for Stormy Daniels. He's in jail now, by the way. Stormy Daniels herself, you know, we don't know what happened between she and Donald Trump. Frankly, I really don't care. The only thing that I am concerned about when it comes to Stormy Daniels and Donald Trump is whether Donald Trump lied about Stormy Daniels in a relationship in a federal deposition, because that's what got President Clinton in trouble. It got him impeached, and it should have. So I don't know exactly what's going on with that, but now the New York City grand jury, the Southern District of Manhattan, is going to take a look at this deal to see if there's any criminal involved. Okay, whatever. Let's see what else here. Is there something else about that I need to do? I think I might have jumped the gun on some of that. There's some other stuff. There's another Trump article that I want to do. Oh, yeah. I hit the wrong one. Here we go. No, I actually hit the right one. I just didn't get the right article under my notes. So let's see. Trump. Sorry about this. I normally have this stuff wired tight. Not so much. Let's see. Trump and Bernstein. Okay. All right. From what we understand, the president of the United States, former president of the United States, is suing Bob Woodward. Okay, it's not Carl Bernstein. It's Bob Woodward. Okay. Bob Woodward apparently did an interview with Donald Trump, and he recorded the interview. And what he did, he used some of that audio in the audio version of the book. Paramount Global, CBS Corporation, and Simon & Schuster, the audiobook publishers, are also named in the suit. Woodward became one of journalism industry's most iconic reporters when he and Carl Bernstein covered the Watergate scandal in the mid-'70s, which ultimately led to the resignation of Richard Nixon. They loved it so much, they're trying to do it again. Overall, the 45th president accuses those named in the suit for violating his copyrights because the interview recordings were released without his permission. If that's true, he's got them. According to court records, President Trump claims that Woodward decided to exploit, usurp, and capitalize on President Trump's voice by releasing the interview sound recordings of their interviews, and that in the form of an audiobook published under the title, The Trump Tapes. Oh, there's nothing biased about that, is there? The description of the Trump Tapes audiobook on Audible reads in part, the Trump Tapes reveal Trump in his own words, a man consumed by the past, clinging to his grievances, unable to understand his responsibility as president, or address the crises affecting the country. None of that is true. President Trump did just fine. President Trump told Woodward numerous times the interviews were to be used by Woodward and Woodward only for the sole purpose of accurately quoting President Trump for the written word. In example, rage, and not for any other purpose, including providing marketing or selling the interviews to the public press or the media in any way, shape, or form. According to the lawsuit, they've got him. Donald Trump has him. He's got him cold. This is going to disappear fast. A great big check is going to be handed out. Nobody's going to be able to say anything. They're going to sign non-disclosures, and that will be that. Okay, President Trump has them. You know, I've done a lot of those interviews. As a matter of fact, what I do with the interviews, when I do those kinds of things, I don't record them. I don't record them because I don't want that material around. What I do is I take notes. I do. Now, if this was a legal proceeding, obviously I'd record the whole thing. But an interview for, say, for example, a journalistic effort, no. What I do is I read back the quotes to make sure that I got them exactly right. And if the person that I'm interviewing wants to change the quote for any reason, I'll do that too. Because it's not about me trying to catch them making a mistake. When I interview somebody, I'm trying to get the answers they want to give. Do I ask follow-ups? Yeah. Does it often get into territory that was unintended? Uh-huh. Has everybody been really, really cool about that? Everybody. Because I'm not interested in trying to make somebody look stupid for the sake of my own personal moniker. Try to get the story. And there's a big difference between that and what Woodward has done, which is to totally screw this up. Man, you can't do that stuff. You just can't do it. This is the Wells Report. We'll be back with hour number 3 coming up in just a moment. And hour number 3, right around the corner. Stay put. North to south, coast to coast, around the world. This is the Wells Report. My name is John David Wells. What do we do here? We report the news, honestly, fairly. We analyze the news for fact and bias. We point out both. I make commentary. That's not news, just my opinion, fully debatable. And so we debate. News, analysis, commentary, and debate. How do you debate? Well, you can do what Errol did from just outside Akron, Ohio, just a moment ago. I want to say hello again to the hardworking guys at North Coast Environmental Filtration, just outside Akron, Ohio. They're listening today. We really appreciate their time and appreciate the fact that they want the news, because that's what we give. So you can do that on the chat room, by the way. You can also, that's Facebook. You can't do it on YouTube. For some reason, YouTube is covering the show, but they're not allowing you to interact on the chat room. This broadcast, as you probably listened the past couple of days, has been, it was suspended by YouTube for airing a portion of the Project Veritas expose on Pfizer. I did not report that story as an extension of Project Veritas. I reported the story because it was a national news story. That Project Veritas did that became a national story in and of itself. The story that Project Veritas was telling, there's a differentiation there. I didn't play the entire tape. They don't do tape anymore. I didn't play the entire recording. I played the part so that you got the gist of it, because that's what I was supposed to do. And I put a disclaimer in front of it. I don't trust hidden camera interviews. And I put a disclaimer on the end of it like, okay, this interview happened at a bar with this Pfizer executive. It's been now reported that he was indeed a Pfizer executive. Well, who was buying the alcohol? See, this is the problem with hidden camera interviews. You know, you can get yourself into very deep legal trouble. And oh, by the way, Project Veritas has had a few settlements they've had to pay out. So that's what I was doing. But the national news story required reporting, so I did it. And YouTube did exactly what they did with Project Veritas. They suspended them under identical circumstances as suspending the Wells Report. At least they were consistent. So we were off completely for a few days, and then I found out yesterday that, yeah, you could watch the Wells Report on YouTube. Matter of fact, yesterday's show's up there. Very cool. But you can't interact with the broadcast. So if you're on YouTube and you're watching, let's see how many people are watching on YouTube. There are a bundle of them. If you're on YouTube and you want to interact, you can call 817-379-2172. 817 is right there on the lower third. Right there on the lower third. Right there. You can call right there. Or you can also go to facebook.com/The Wells Report, John David Wells, JONDAVIDWELLS, all one word. And you'll pop right up on the Wells Report page, and you'll be able to see the show. And you'll be able to interact too. Hi, Alicia. She just interacted. See, and I said hi. How cool is that? So the issue regarding the way the media handled itself during the Trump years is legendary. I said at the time on this broadcast that journalism professors would be studying the way the journalistic world handled Donald Trump in college classes and prep schools and so on and so forth for time immemorial. Because the news that we currently see right now is scarcely more than the state media run by the old Soviet Union through a news agency called TASS and two newspapers, Pravda and Izvestia. Pravda meaning truth, Izvestia meaning news. The joke was there was no truth and there was no Pravda in Izvestia. There was no Izvestia in Pravda. So funny. But what we have here is we have an American version of Pravda, the state newspaper. And it's because all these people work together because they all have the same politics, and they decided that politics was more important than journalism. There is a liberal media watchdog. It's called Columbia Journalism Review. They have just published a wide-ranging retrospective of the media's Russiagate coverage that examines several news organizations, their various roles throughout the Trump-Russia saga, leveling most of the criticism toward the New York Times, the paper of record, all the news that's fit to print, the old gray lady. Quote, no narrative did more to shape Trump's relations with the press than Russiagate. The story, which included the Steele dossier, the Mueller report, among other totemic moments, resulted in Pulitzer Prizes as well as embarrassing retractions and damaged careers, according to the Columbia Journalism Review executive editor, Kyle Pope. Pope explained the CJR spent the last 18 months examining the American media coverage of Trump and Russia in granular detail to determine what it means as Americans inch closer to the 2024 election. The findings were published in a lengthy 4-part series. The first section begins with a story about then New York Times executive director Dean Baquet's reaction when he found out that special counsel Robert Mueller did not plan to pursue Trump's ousting, telling his staff, holy S word, Bob Mueller is not going to do it. That's right. Because Bob Mueller found out that the FBI had lied to the FISA court. He found out all the deep state miscreancy. I'm pretty sure that Bob Mueller put it all out there and said, okay, you want me to report this? What do you want to see in the report? So all these Democrat lawyers that happen to be on the Mueller staff concocted some gobbledygookian foolishness, threw it down at the feet of the people of the United States. Everybody reported on it, got their Pulitzer Prizes, and everybody went away. Well, until the Columbia Journalism Review showed up. And suddenly the story comes spilling out at our feet once again. Baquet, speaking to his colleagues at a town hall meeting soon after the testimony concluded, acknowledged the Time had been caught a tiny bit flat-footed by the outcome of Mueller's investigation. There wouldn't be a Mueller investigation if they absolutely were not positive that Donald Trump was a dirty guy and he was going to be found out. And the New York Times said, we are absolutely going to run with whatever drivel comes out of this preliminary parts of the Mueller investigation because we are absolutely sure that Donald Trump is dirty and we're going to find out. Except that's not the way it worked. That is not the way it worked. And the New York Times got caught a tiny little bit flat-footed. Girth, Jeff Girth, the investigative reporter who authored the lengthy CJR retrospective, said that tiny little bit flat-footed would prove to be more than an understatement, but neither Dean Baquet nor his successor nor any of the paper's reporters would offer anything like a post-mortem of the paper's Trump-Russia saga, unlike the examination the Times did of its coverage before the Iraq War. Girth believes the Time damaged its credibility outside its own bubble, and even the famed journalist Bob Woodward told him coverage of the Russia probe wasn't handled well. Duh. The examination of Time's questionable coverage began even before Trump was elected into office. Highlighting a report from August 2016, the claim was Trump campaign chairman Paul Manafort allegedly accepted $13 million in cash payments from pro-Russia entities in Ukraine. While he did not deny the ballpark figure he received, Manafort insisted the cash angle was clearly wrong. But as Girth noted, the Times won a Pulitzer Prize for the work on Manafort. Then the Times appeared to go 180 degrees in its coverage. As Girth noted, it ran the headline, investigating Donald Trump, FBI sees no clear link to Russia in October of 2016 pertaining to the conspiracy of secret communications between the Trump Organization and Kremlin-linked Alpha Bank. But in January of 2017, just before the Trump inauguration, Iran intercepted Russian communications, part of inquiry into Trump associates. That's the little drivel that's leaking out of the Mueller report. Girth wrote the story evoked a strong reaction from Peter Strzok, who was leading the FBI inquiry. No substance and largely wrong, he texted. The press is going to undermine its credibility. The paper coverage escalated as laid out in part 2 of the CJR retrospective with a report published in February 2017, headlined Trump campaign aides had repeated contacts with Russian intelligence, noting that Dean Baquet, the former publisher of the New York Times, personally signed off with running it, calling it the biggest story in years. Despite Baquet's expressed desire for details to be included in the report and to point out whether contacts were considered innocent or sinister, the published details were vague and few, noted Girth. Quote, the piece did contain a disclaimer up high noting the sources so far had seen no evidence of the Trump campaign colluding with the Russians. But in the next paragraph, it reported anonymous officials being alarmed about the supposed Russian Trump contacts because they occurred while Trump made his comments in Florida in July of 2016, wondering whether Russia could find Hillary's missing emails. That was a joke. It was a joke to everybody except the people that were trying to sabotage President Trump, the deep state. The story said the FBI declined to comment. In fact, the FBI was quickly ripping the piece to shreds. In a series of annotated comments by Peter Strzok, who managed the Russia case, Girth wrote his analysis, prepared for his bosses, found numerous inaccuracies, including a categorical refutation of the lead and headline. We are unaware of any Trump advisors engaging in conversations with Russian intelligence officials. Comey immediately checked with other intelligence agencies to see if they had any such evidence. They came up empty and relayed the findings in a closed Senate briefing, according to a testimony at the Senate hearing months later. The Times appeared to legitimize Christopher Steele, the ex-British spy who concocted the infamous dossier, claiming he had a credible track record while Steele's so-called primary source was telling the FBI that Steele misstated or exaggerated in his report and that the information stemming from Russia was rumor and speculation. Remember, the FBI knew all this stuff but let President Trump twist in the wind during the entire time. Part 3 offered examples of the Times' sleight of hand coverage against President Trump in comparison to other hostile outlets. For example, Trump explained his decision to fire FBI Director James Comey, mentioning the Russia thing as being a made-up story to NBC's Lester Holt, but acknowledging the firing would likely lengthen out the investigation. The media focused on the Russia thing quote. The New York Times did 5 stories over the next week citing the Russia thing remarks, but leaving out the fuller context. The Post and CNN, by comparison, including additional language in their first-day story. In other words, the Columbia Journalism Review is blowing holes all through everything the New York Times did regarding the so-called Russiagate mess in the Trump administration, which dogged the Trump administration through the first 2 years, and then COVID took over. Those Pulitzer Prizes are made out of wax. They need to be melted down and recast into something, shall we say, credible. But I doubt they're going to do that because I guess they look too good on a resume. But if you're trying to explain why your resume is so trashed by inaccuracy, it's not going to make that much difference. This is the Wells Report. This is the Wells Report. My name is John David Wells. Telephone number is 817-379-2172. 817-379-2172. Look, this article that I'm giving you, that I'm reporting, is one you need to read. I'm going to put the link up on the Restream chat that we're currently dealing with. You need to go through all of that. You need to go through every single bit of this article, because I'm going through it, and I have to tell you, it answers a lot of questions. So far, what we've done is we've noticed that in this, Peter Strzok was realizing that the journalism was wrong and was reporting it to his bosses. We've learned that the New York Times publisher, Dean Baquet, was so sure that Trump was going to get caught doing something that he just ran every possible little dribble of whatever, up to and including things that Peter Strzok said were completely lack credibility. Now, remember, the New York Times got a whole bunch of Pulitzer Prizes for this reporting. It was all lies. The FBI allowed the President of the United States to twist in the wind, knowing full well that what they were dealing with was wrong. Listen to this. The Times avoided reporting the things that Peter Strzok was saying. They'd report some of them, and they wouldn't report some of them. In other words, how do you create propaganda? It's not what you add, it's what you leave out. The Times avoided covering some of the more damning texts from Peter Strzok, who wrote, "There's no there there." That's where that came from. Shortly after the appointment of special counsel Robert Mueller, something Girth noted was covered by the Wall Street Journal and the Washington Post. While one former Times reporter admitted to Girth we should have run with it, a spokesperson for the Times told him it reported on the Russiagate saga thoroughly and in line with our editorial standards. Says something about your editorial standards, doesn't it? Yeah. Yeah, the simple case of the matter is that Peter Strzok wasn't the only one that knew that. Van Jones of CNN knew that. He said this was a nothing burger. What are we doing? He worked for CNN. Of course, he didn't say it again because he was riding the political pony. Girth, the person who wrote this particular article in the Columbia Journalism Review, highlighted how the Times was the first to report on the infamous 2016 Trump Tower meeting with Donald Trump Jr. and a Russian lawyer, which fueled the collusion narrative even further, despite the meeting being a flop. And now the Times reported that then White House counsel Don McGahn threatened to resign after the Trump order to fire Robert Mueller. By the way, that was a lie. McGahn never told President Trump he was even considering resigning. But that's not what you heard in the newspaper, was it? He then went into the Times' favoritism toward Democrats versus Republicans, describing a House GOP memo spearheaded by Devin Nunes about alleged FBI abuses in the FISA surveillance of the Trump campaign. He called those politically charged. That outraged Democrats, and then omitted the claim that the Steele dossier was essential to the warrant. That was Andrew McCabe that said, without the Steele dossier, there is no FISA court. Well, the FBI wanted the FISA court because they wanted to keep spying on Carter Page and George Papadopoulos. So they set up a circle of journalism and then said, see, even the Times is reporting it, and the Times dutifully did its job. And the FBI broke the law and lied to the FISA court. How come these people aren't going to jail? Because in these United States at this moment, politics is more important than the rule of law. So much for no one being above that law, huh? This is the Wells Report. Back with more in a moment. This is the Wells Report. My name is John David Wells. Our telephone number is 817-379-2172. The Columbia Journalism Review has gone back and done a granular review of journalism involving the Russiagate hoax during the Trump administration. I don't have a link to the original study, but I do have a link to the Fox News coverage of the study, and it is damning. It's absolutely damning. I put the wrong link up there, then I corrected it. The link is up on the chat room. Go to the chat room. If you have to go through Facebook to do it, please do it. But get a hold of this link. It's Fox News. And it's awful. The New York Times, and I can say this because I covered the story every single day. The New York Times, although I didn't know it at the time, was telling a different story than the Washington Post and so on and so forth. You know, I take different journalistic sources. I double source everything I report to you. And these things weren't agreeing. I even talked about it. I said the toughest part about doing this job is when you have two credible news sources and they tell different stories. Greetings. This is the Wells Report. Hi.
Hello.
Hi, who's this?
Hi, it's Daryl again. You told me to call you back after 5.
Yeah, except it's 4:30.
Oh, it's 4:30 your time. All right.
Yeah, I think. Are you on the Eastern time zone and near Akron?
I am.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I'm on the Central time zone, so it's only 4:30 here.
Okay. I looked and checked everywhere. I couldn't find it.
We'll find it together. Do me a favor. Did you hear me talk to your guys at the filtration plant?
Hey, somebody called. I wondered why people texted us for it. I just got 4 texts.
That's awesome. Tell everybody that I sincerely appreciate the fact that they're listening to me.
They love you.
Oh, well,
Even, yeah.
you tell them I love them back
Called in.
at North Coast Environmental Filtration out of Akron, Ohio.
Correct.
Hey, Errol, how'd you find the show?
On Google.
On you? What did you? How did you? How
You
did,
one time.
what?
Oh, and then I heard you talking, and then I just Googled it. But I Googled it after the fact that other people talked about your name, and after I heard you talk, then I went forward with it.
Oh, that's so nice.
You have a really good show. That's a true radio show.
Thank you, sir. Thank you very much for
I
all those
appreciate
kind
it.
words. Call me back in about 45 minutes.
Thanks very much, John.
Thank you, brother. Bye-bye. That's Errol. It's amazing. This is the greatest thing. See, radio's wonderful. I love radio. I've been doing radio ever since I was 15. And radio is cool, but in most cases, radio is just your town. In this particular case, there are people in Germany and Italy and Spain and France and the British Isles, in Australia. There are all kinds of people from all kinds of places listening to this. I have no idea who's going to ring that phone. I have no idea when that's who it's going to be. It's one of the joys of doing a live. Okay, it's not actually a podcast, is it? But it's nice doing a live show in a place where everybody is there. It's not like I'm trying to. I mean, I've had all the fame and accolades one man could ever hope for. Now I'm just trying to do the work. That's all I'm trying to do. And it's so cool that people like the hardworking people at North Coast Environmental Filtration of Akron, Ohio, found the show and listened to it. I've got to go to the Department of Transportation in Oklahoma. What I'm going to do is I'm just going to keep driving north, and I'm going to drive to someplace near Akron, Ohio, and I'm going to broadcast from their parking lot. I got to figure out a way to do it. Of course, being able to afford a generator might be helpful. Yeah. but I'll figure out some way of going to North Coast Environmental Filtration. God bless those guys. God bless Errol. And we're going to fight. He wants to, if you happen to remember, what was the date of the show that I interviewed Greg Jarrett? He's trying to find that show. If you happen to know what it is, I'm going to be able to find it, but if you happen to know which one it is right offhand, that would be really helpful. All right. So here's what we want to do. We want to go back to this journalism review of the Times because the stuff in it is. I was talking about the Wells Report journalistic standards. And granted, I'm not on the leading edge of the story. What I'm doing is I'm correlating everybody else's reporting and bringing it to you. But the thing about it is that I noticed that there were inconsistencies. And the hardest part of my job is to reconcile those inconsistencies. And what I could not reconcile, I just put out there and saying, okay, here's what this person says. Here's what that person says. What do you think? But that's what journalism is. That's what reporting the story is. And when you abuse that charter, you damage society. And the New York Times did exactly that. Part 4 of the report included an additional instance of Times bias by omission in its coverage of President Trump's 2018 Helsinki press conference alongside Russian President Vladimir Putin. Trump was asked whether U.S. intelligence or Putin should be believed when it comes to 2016 election meddling. Trump responded by saying, I don't see any reason why it would be Russia that was responsible. He responded by saying, I don't see any reason why it would be Russia was responsible for meddling in the 2016 election. And then added that he had great confidence in his intelligence people. The New York Times only reported the first part of the sentence, the first part of the statement. The first remark received all the attention. Some outlets like the Times did not include his comments about great confidence in the U.S. intelligence in their stories, while others, such as the Post, did. There are people that still quote that on Twitter today. That he thinks that he had more confidence in Putin than he had in American intelligence, even though at the time he said he had great confidence in his intelligence people. But that's not what got reported. And it sure as hell isn't what got remembered. The author of the piece detailed the Times narrative about Russian interference in the 2016 election, despite intelligence officials assessing in January 2017 that, quote, the impact Russian activities had on the outcome of 2016 could not be measured. The New York Times weighed in at over 10,000 words in September with its own verdict. The plot to subvert an election, the headline read. The first sentence described an obscure banner of Putin that unfurled on his birthday a few weeks before the election on a Manhattan bridge. The report quickly noted the banner was promoted by a fake Twitter account that ultimately was traced back to the Internet Research Agency. Remember those guys? Those guys almost drove me nuts in a previous election. Because I was getting reporting on Hillary Clinton in 2016 that I could not rationalize. And I kept going further and further and further out into the circles trying to find ways to confirm the Internet Research Agency. I talked about it on the air, and when I found out that it was a Russian troll organization, I found out sometime later, everything changed. This was the Times concluded in the fourth paragraph, the most effective foreign interference in American election history, this banner hanging from a Manhattan bridge. To help buttress its sweeping conclusion, the Times wrote the Facebook post by IRA had an eventual audience of 126 million Americans, describing that impressive reach as almost matching the number of people voting in the election. The eventual audience of 126 million Americans claimed by the Times was called bogus by veteran journalist Gareth Porter, since the figure was only a potential audience, saying that in the paper's omission that Facebook users were exposed to 33 trillion news feeds during that time period should vie in the annals of journalism as one of the most spectacularly misleading use of statistics of all time. It was about that time when I discovered the Mark Twain quote, "There are lies, there are damn lies, and there are statistics." There you go. There you go. The retrospective touched on the fallout of the Durham probe, how its findings crushed the credibility of the Steele dossier and the media coverage of it as a result. It prompted the Washington Post to retract large chunks of a 2017 article in November of 2021 and to follow back with a long review of Steele's sources and methods. The Wall Street Journal and CNN did similar looks back. The Times offered no such retraction. The New York Times didn't ever retract the story, though the paper and other news organizations were quick to highlight the lack of firsthand evidence for many of the dossier's substantive allegations, said Girth. There was a lack of firsthand evidence on all the assertions, but they published it anyway. In his afterwards section, the author concluded the erosion of listen to this. The erosion of journalistic norms and the media's own lack of transparency about its work, the media's work, has fueled distrust in the media broadly, and they're reporting facts that run counter to the prevailing narrative. In January 2018, for example, the New York Times ignored a publicly available document showing that the FBI's lead investigator didn't think, after 10 months of inquiry into the Trump-Russia ties, that there was much there. This omission disserved Times readers. The paper said its reporting was thorough and in line with our editorial standards. Girth, a former Times reporter, he's the author of this study, wrote, "Another axiom of journalism that was sometimes neglected in the Trump-Russia coverage was the failure to seek and reflect comment from people who are subject of serious criticism. The Times guidelines called it special obligation, yet in stories by the Times involving such disparate figures like Joseph Mifsud, the Maltese academic who supposedly started the whole FBI inquiry, Christopher Steele, the former British spy who authored the dossier, Konstantin Kilimnik, the consultant cited by some as the best evidence of collusion between Russia and Trump, the paper's reporters failed to include comments from the person being criticized." And Trump said something about it. "They've never asked me," he said. The study took aim at the Times' frequent reliance on vague anonymous sources throughout its Russiagate coverage, particularly the catchphrase, "people or persons familiar with the matter." Listen to this. You know that phrase? This according to people or a person familiar with the matter. Okay? That's how they named their source. The Times used it over 1,000 times in stories involving Trump and Russia between October 6, 2016 and the end of his presidency, according to a Nexus search. The last executive editor I worked for, Bill Keller, frowned on its use. He told the staff repeatedly the phrase was so vague, it could even mean the reporter, and sometimes it did. The Times, in a statement to the Columbia Journalism Review, said we have strong rules in place governing the use of anonymous sources. The New York Times has not responded to Fox News after Fox requested their comment on that story. You know, when I was reporting this story and things weren't adding up and I was using logic, I got a lot of criticism from a lot of people thinking that I was some sort of a right-wing nut just trying to explain or apologize for Donald Trump. In point of fact, a lot of what the New York Times was talking about did not add up in my mind. When I added everything up together, I allowed logic to dictate my reporting. I did not make the mistakes. the Washington Post had to make. They had to retract. I didn't make the mistakes that CNN or the Wall Street Journal made. Because I actually thought it through. I've always been skeptical of the process that I use to make this broadcast, which is why I work so hard on it, because my own skepticism of what I'm putting together for this report forces me to do more work on it. And when I finally hear things like this, years after the fact, to find out that I was right the whole time, I don't know whether to laugh or cry. This is the Wells Report. My name is John David Wells. The show was called Politically Incorrect. It starred a young man who was making great hay out of the fact that he would say things that people only thought in a way that was clever and witty and sometimes infuriating, but was always entertaining. The guy was Bill Maher. ABC canceled the show over something that Bill said. So funny. They backed up a show called Politically Incorrect, and then when Bill Maher was politically incorrect, they ended the show. So stupid. It's picked up by HBO. That's where it lives today. I remember when I first started doing the Wells Report, the temptation was to follow the footsteps of noted right-wing talk show hosts. And I did that for a while until Rush Limbaugh started talking about the Rush Echo syndrome. That happened over 20 years ago. And I stopped doing it. I stopped listening to Rush. I stopped listening to his broadcast. I stopped listening to everybody else. And the reason I stopped listening to everybody else is because I didn't want their thoughts in my head. And so everything I said on the broadcast from that moment forward was the result of my own thought process. Read the logic thing I was talking about, trying to rationalize several different versions of the same story. And apparently I'm a lot better at it than I thought. Always being skeptical, always putting truth before flight of fancy. And what I noticed over time, I noticed that it was a good decision to stop talking about how one political party was bad and the other political party was good, especially when the political party that you thought was good wasn't so good. And I finally decided that I had to distance myself from both political parties and report objectively, and I did. People still say that this is a right-wing show. Well, that's because I base everything on the Constitution, which is basically what we should be doing as well. All of us should be basing everything on the Constitution. And when something happens that's extracurricular or just plain breaks the promises of the Constitution of the United States, people should absolutely not tolerate it and take it to the limit on their response. I'm talking about the lawful limit. I'm talking about the reasonable limit. I'm not talking about crazy, stupid stuff. The Constitution is brilliant. We need to follow it. And so, yeah, I look at things through a constitutional lens, not a Republican one. If it seems as though I am a conservative, well, so is the Constitution. The entire document was designed to rein in government. So Bill Maher and I have evolved throughout our careers. Bill was kind of a leftist firebrand until he realized that he was arguing absurdity. And he has gotten to the point now where his maturity has taken over, and even though he is certainly a liberal, now people to his left, the left, came out in force against him on Twitter today, arguing he was a right-wing culture warrior who made racist comments against minorities and had, of all things, a smug face. Bill Maher trended this morning on the social media platform after CNN announced that Maher's post-show segment, Overtime, will air on Fridays during CNN Tonight. But even before Maher's deal with CNN became public, the comedian was already a punching bag for some on the left after he came out against woke education and accused environmentalist celebrities of hypocrisy. Leftist and Young Turks host Seng Iger claimed that Maher was a culture warrior for the political right. Bill Maher is actually perfect for CNN, to be honest. False equivalencies, propping up right-wing culture war talking points, fighting for the status quo, and that smug face. Jake Tapper might get jealous because he might be outsmugged. MSNBC host Mehdi Hassan depicted Maher as a racist. Bill Maher obsessed with the idea that cancel culture is out of control, yet Maher himself just got a new CNN gig, despite saying outrageous things about Muslims, Arabs, and trans people, making crass jokes about Asians and using the N-word on TV. Okay, that's random. The host of the Mehdi Hassan show clarified that while cancellation of public figures is real, right-wing reactionary white men who shout the loudest about it almost always seem to do just fine themselves. Keith Olbermann wants to stomp on Bill Maher. Maher, fired from his MSNBC gig over 10 years ago. Maher's new deal with CNN was like giving him leftovers to the network, so Bill Maher's leftovers will run on CNN's Friday night. Well, I got to do something, Keith. You know, if you hadn't lost your credibility, Keith, that could be you. Keith, You brilliant man. You just can't let your politics run away with your brain. I like Keith Olbermann, even though he's a bomb thrower now. Keith, why did you do that to yourself? Man. Oh, Keith Olbermann. How to become a cartoon in your own time. Boy, I hope that doesn't happen to me. This has been the Wells Report. Listen, that article that I just read about the Columbia Journalism Review, you got to read it. You just do. Go to Fox News and read it. See you tomorrow for another edition of the Wells Report. God bless you. Okay, my friends, I'm going to talk to Errol from Ohio. I'm going to talk to him here in a minute, and I'm going to get on with what I have to do. So God bless all y'all, and take good care of yourself, and I will see you again tomorrow.